Hi everyone, and welcome to the Research for Social Impact podcast presented by the Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne University of Technology. My name is Susan Pizzati and I'm the Principal Industry Fellow in Social Impact here at CSI Swinburne, and I'm delighted to be your host for this series. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are producing this podcast today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. For those of you who may not be familiar with CSI Swinburne, we are a highly industry-engaged, practice-oriented research and teaching centre based in Swinburne School of Business, Law and Entrepreneurship. We are one of 4 university-based nodes of the highly respected CSI National Network, which also includes the University of New South Wales, Flinders University and the University of Western Australia. Throughout this series, we'll be bringing you conversations, interviews and information from our researchers, sector experts, industry partners and even our students and alumni, aligned with our core areas of work, which include social entrepreneurship, social finance and investment, measuring and communicating social impact, community services innovation, and employment service system reform for marginalised groups. People with disability have long been underrepresented in workforces all around the world, including here in Australia. Employment rates for people with disability in Australia have stayed about the same for the past 20 years, and there's still a big difference between how many people with disability have jobs compared to those without disability. The gap is even wider for particular groups of people with disability. So, for example, we know that people with intellectual disability or cognitive impairment are far less likely to have jobs in what's known as open or mainstream employment than other people with disability, and that they also struggle to find employers who are genuinely inclusive. Most recently, the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability found that more needed to be done to help lift the employment rates of all people with disability, and explicitly called on the public sector to step up and lead the way by creating more employment opportunities within government. Now, the New South Wales Government has responded to that call by setting a target for the employment of people with disability across the New South Wales government sector workforce, and it has specifically called out people with intellectual disability as part of its commitment to reaching that target. So on today's episode, we'll be exploring some recent research that's been undertaken by CSI Swinburne and the New South Wales Government as part of that commitment, which specifically looks at how the public sector can contribute to increasing employment opportunities for people with intellectual disability across its workforce. To do that, we're joined by 2 of the key contributors to the project, my colleague at CSI Swinburne, Lucy Macali, and Maiten Pennay from the New South Wales Government. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Susan. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Lucy is a research fellow at CSI Swinburne with over 25 years of experience in supporting the employment of people with disability. She brings extensive expertise from both public service and the disability sector to the conversation today, so we're very fortunate to have her with us. Most recently, Lucy contributed to an increase in the employment rate of people with disability across the Victorian public service through the development and implementation of a whole-of-government economic participation policy, which included embedding a focus on the employment of people with disability within the Victorian social procurement framework. Her central role in the disability employment sector over many years, including the development of its national peak body and working directly with some of Australia's largest employers to increase disability confidence, led to her induction into the Disability Employment Australia's Hall of Fame in August 2014. Maiten is a Senior Advisor for Inclusion and Diversity in the People branch of the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice, where she works to create workplaces in which people feel safe, supported and able to bring their whole selves to work. At DCJ, Maiten led the development of the Digital Workplace Adjustment Passport and established the Workplace Adjustment Wizard Network, which is a trained group that supports staff, managers and HR to have practical, confident and respectful conversations about workplace adjustments. Her work focuses on taking the fear and complexity out of these conversations and replacing it with clarity, empathy and common sense. Before joining DCJ, Maiten worked at the New South Wales Public Service Commission, contributing to whole-of-government workforce initiatives, including the New South Wales Government Capability Framework, the rollout of the Flexible Working If Not, Why Not policy, and programs delivered through the Commission's Leadership Academy. Maiten is currently working on the implementation of the Department of Communities and Justice's Gender Equality Action Plan and partners closely with teams across the department to embed inclusive, accessible ways of working. Luckily for us, Maiten's always up for a chat about flexible working, workplace adjustments, and why simply asking people what they need is often the most powerful place to start. Welcome, Maiten. It's wonderful to have you with us for this conversation. So, now we know a little bit about you both. Perhaps we could begin our conversation today by talking about some of the bigger issues here. So before we get into the specifics of your project, Lucy, can you tell us why are employment rates so low for Australians with intellectual disability?
Thanks, Susan, and happy to be speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. My pronouns are she, her.
Thanks, Lucy.
People with intellectual disability face many structural and social barriers to employment, and these challenges can add up and create challenges. These include things like negative attitudes and low expectations of people with intellectual disability, education skills and gaps, limited social networks, and segregated workforces.
So maybe we can unpack some of those aspects a little bit more. Can you talk to us about negative attitudes and low expectations of people with intellectual disability? What are the impacts of that you see?
Negative attitudes and low expectations mean that many people, including families, employers, and the wider community, assume that people with intellectual disability can't work or that they won't make good employees. And that can lead to discrimination and fewer chances for them to show what they can do. And this culture of low expectations also sees people miss out on experiences that many of us take for granted that help build our work readiness, you might call it. And these are things such as work experience while at school and access to good quality career guidance.
Okay. And what are you seeing in terms of the education and skills gaps that you mentioned earlier?
Yep. So lower literacy and numeracy can limit opportunities. For example, young people with intellectual disability can often spend their teenage years in segregated education settings, not in the mainstream. They might have fewer community activities and they're less likely to finish year 12. They're also less likely to gain early work experience, like part-time jobs after school or work placements. And without those opportunities that most of us get access to, they miss out on key chances to build skills and confidence.
And you also mentioned the impact of limited social networks. So, how does that impact the ability of people with intellectual disability to access the job market?
So many jobs come through who you know and networks. People with intellectual disability can often have fewer connections to help them get a foot in the door.
And what do you mean when you talk about the segregation of the jobs market?
So many people with intellectual disability work in places that only employ people with intellectual disability, and this keeps them out of mainstream jobs and can reinforce their exclusion even further. This means that employers don't get to experience firsthand what people with intellectual disability can offer the workplace, and those opportunities just then don't materialise. People don't see the opportunities.
And I would imagine that the changing nature of work is also impacting opportunities for people with intellectual disability. What do we know about how the changing job market is impacting the employment prospects of people with disability?
Yeah, absolutely, Susan. Today's job market has changed, as we know. All of us are increasingly being affected by this. More jobs now require higher skills, and technology and automation have replaced many traditional roles. And this has been ongoing for a long time. Entry-level jobs are also much harder to come by, which makes it tougher for people with intellectual disability to find work that fits their abilities and interests. And that's why targeted approaches are increasingly seen as a way forward, where job opportunities are created specifically for people in line with their skills and interests.
And what about the broader systemic issues in this space? Are there things that are making it harder for people with intellectual disability to find and keep their jobs?
Many businesses, especially small to medium-sized ones, often don't have human resource human resources
Mhm.
to manage some of the additional considerations that there might be when it comes to jobs for people with intellectual disability. And that's mainly around things like job design and how to support someone to thrive at work. So in the end, employers hesitate in taking up that opportunity even when they really might want to. And this can also be challenging when there might not be enough specialist support services out there with the right know-how in making these job opportunities happen, where it works for both the person and their employer. And then when we look at large organisations, they can present even more barriers. And this can be due to things like narrow selection criteria for their jobs and inflexible interview processes that are often online and automated, complex onboarding processes, and what I call a general lack of imagination when it
Mm.
comes to job recruitment and design. Well, it's always been done this way, and we're not really open to change.
And so, how does that compare to the experience of people with intellectual disability in other countries?
So Australia's not alone when it comes to low employment rates for people with intellectual disability. The employment challenges are similar worldwide, driven by the same social and structural barriers. And research shows that many young people with intellectual disability leave school and go straight into unemployment, no matter what country they're in. And there are also segregated workplaces in many countries, which keep people separate from mainstream jobs and limit real inclusion.
And do we know what works when it comes to supporting employment pathways for people with intellectual disability? What does the research tell us?
It is crystal clear on this, Susan.
Okay.
Structured, high quality work experience, work integrated learning, where learning occurs on the job,
Mhm.
and supported employment approaches are the most effective ways to help people with intellectual disability into work. Work experience and on the job learning are particularly critical for long term success as they form a strong foundation to build a career on, as they do for all young people. And when we're talking about supported employment, we're referring to a particularly tailored approach to supporting people into work. And this includes personalised assessment, which helps develop a deep understanding of a person's goals, their skills, and their support needs. And it's done in real job settings, and it helps build confidence and help them work out their preferences when it comes to work. Job development and placement, done through individualised job search plans that match people with roles that suit their interests and their strengths. On the job training, using structured learning methods that help ensure that employees learn tasks needed for their job and that they meet the expectations of the workplace. And ongoing support for as long as it's needed for both the employee with disability and their employer to help ensure job sustainability.
Thanks, Lucy. That's incredibly helpful background. And now that we've got that, Maiten, can you tell us a little bit more about this particular research project? So, what's it all about? What's been your involvement in the research?
Thanks, Susan. As you mentioned, I'm Maiten Pennay. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Morningong people in southwest Sydney, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Inclusion and Diversity at the Department of Communities and Justice. So I guess my role, as you mentioned in the intro, is about making DCJ a more inclusive place to work and building a team that reflects the communities that we serve.
Mhm.
And this project is just an example of how we're trying to achieve that. So we teamed up with Lucy and a team at the Centre for Social Impact to look at how we could create more opportunities, how all of the research that they've done for us, how we could put that into practice within a government environment. And we put together an advisory board of people across private and public sector who work in this space or who have lived experience to advise us and support the research along the way to make sure that what we're doing was fit for purpose. And now that we've got that research, it's about turning those insights into action. So creating a pilot program that will open up real employment pathways into DCJ for people with intellectual disability. So for us, it's an exciting step forward towards making a workplace more inclusive, not just for people with disability, but for people with intellectual disability who have traditionally been excluded from the workplace.
And in terms of actually commissioning the research, what were you looking for the research aspect to provide to the work that you were doing?
So we really wanted to dig into what's working and what's not working when it comes to employing people with intellectual disability. We found when we did the research and when we went out and did the consultation piece and the focus groups that there's a lot of goodwill across government, which is fantastic. But the know-how and the systems that make inclusion happen just weren't there. We needed to better understand what those barriers were. And for us, it was about getting access to lived experience, to understanding what that lived experience has to say about how they interact with New South Wales government recruitment, so that we could then address those barriers and see what we could do. So moving beyond those good intentions and trying to turn them into action, I guess, is what we were hoping from the research.
Fantastic. And what did we know about the employment of people with intellectual disability across the New South Wales government sector workforce going into this piece of research?
So we really knew very little. The fact is that New South Wales government records if a person has disability if they choose to disclose, but we never record or ask for information below that level. So we don't know the types of disability somebody might come to employment with, which means that we have no real numbers about people with intellectual disability within the organisation. Anecdotally, we know there are a few. Some chose to take part in the consultation for the research piece, but we don't know what the real numbers are. What we do know is that, as Lucy mentioned, a lot of those entry-level roles have disappeared or have been outsourced or are now run by, for example, the building management organisation run by the agency itself, which means that there are less and less opportunities in what would traditionally have been recognised as the right jobs for people with intellectual disability. So that means we need to think outside the box. We need to be creative, and we need to understand if those jobs are disappearing, what are the new jobs of the future? What are other ways that we can include people with intellectual disability within our agency? We know that they've got a lot to offer, so we just need to make sure that we push those barriers out of the way so they can show us.
Thanks, Maiten. And a question for both of you, I guess, in terms of what was the approach you took to this piece of research?
It's Lucy here. We carried out the project in three main stages. Firstly, we reviewed the evidence on what works, and that helped us understand the barriers and the enablers and good practice approaches that we might look to apply in the New South Wales government sector. And then we spoke with key stakeholders across New South Wales government. We interviewed 17 people, either individually or as part of focus groups that we held across government. And then we held 9 interviews with disability support services and disability sector leaders to get their insights into any engagement that they've had in government sector employment. And we got a lot of insights through that process of speaking with people. And then based on the research and our conversations, we developed potential approaches to help create employment opportunities across New South Wales government sector. To do that, we worked closely with DCJ's Inclusion and Diversity team, Maiten and her colleagues, and we tested ideas in a program design workshop with staff, and they helped identify strategies to address any potential barriers to implementation of the ideas that we had in mind.
Sounds like quite an extensive project. And what have you learned? What do we know now that we didn't know before?
It was also fun to do. So, yeah.
Added bonus.
We found that very few government sector employees had direct experience of having a colleague with intellectual disability. And they also weren't aware of any particularly good practice that was happening. in this space. What we also found was there was occasionally confusion between autism and intellectual disability. So that was an interesting insight as well. And despite this lack of experience, we found there was strong interest in employing people with intellectual disability from the range of government employees that we spoke to. And they also understood what they stood to gain from doing that. It was very positive in terms of engagement. The New South Wales government was also seen as being in a unique position to influence change and leading through example. So many of the government sector employees that we spoke to saw that there was a real role for government to lead by example and show the broader business community the way. In terms of barriers that we identified through the research, they were pretty consistent with the literature review that we'd undertaken. We found inaccessible entry points and recruitment processes, limited career pathways for employees with intellectual disability, and real issues around resourcing, of course, capacity and know-how, and commitment to pursue those opportunities. We identified key enablers as being taking a programmatic rather than an ad hoc approach to creating employment pathways, making sure that there was funding to make it happen. So resourcing was obviously critical. Having a positive mindset when entering into this work. Having good communication about the commitment, both internally and externally, so people sort of understand what's possible and what's in scope. And another big enabler was making the process as risk-free as possible for people wanting to get involved, and particularly line managers, recruiters, making sure that they weren't doing this on their own and that there would be support available, whether that be from program partners, through training and capacity building and awareness raising, and that would all help support a sustainable approach.
And so what were the main recommendations coming out of the project then?
So based on what we found through the project, we proposed establishing what we've called a New South Wales Government Career Access Program, which would offer two streams to increase employment for people with intellectual disability, one being internships and the other being lived experience advisor roles, with the focus here being on offering people with intellectual disability the first job in their career journey. So both streams are designed to align with the New South Wales government sector's current operating context, with a strong focus on meeting department business needs to ensure a sustainable approach. And by acting as a person's first employer, the New South Wales government could provide real learning opportunities and help people with intellectual disability build skills for a lifetime of valued work. Existing government sector employees with cognitive disability that we met through the project told us that having this kind of support would have helped them a lot in their own career journey, would have made a big difference to them.
That.
So in terms of internships, what they would be time-limited paid work experience opportunities that would target school leavers and adults with intellectual disability. And they usually include 2 to 3 rotations in a workplace, allowing people to try different roles in the same workplace. And we do have examples of where this is happening already. For example, the Stepping Into program that's offered through the Australian Disability Network, and Project Search, which is offered in Australia through Uniting and Wise Employment. So in terms of the lived experience advisor roles, they could be part-time jobs based in government sector areas like health, education or justice, areas that people with intellectual disability often tend to engage in either as clients or service users. And these roles could offer people with intellectual disability an opportunity to draw on their lived experience of disability to help design more inclusive policies and programs. And a great example of that approach is the Down Syndrome Australia Inclusive Communication Health Ambassadors program.
Amazing. So sounds like some really tangible, actionable sort of insights coming out of the research, Lucy, which is great because as we know, one of the challenges with any piece of research is what we do with the information that it gives us. So a question for you, I guess, Maiten, in terms of what do you think it will take to turn this piece of research into some sort of practical outcomes? What's been your response to the findings?
Yeah, so for us, it was really important that this piece of research didn't just produce another report that sits on a shelf and slowly gets dusty. We really wanted something practical, something scalable, and something that could lead to change. So for us to take the research and turn it into practice, it's going to take commitment,
Mhm.
it's going to take collaboration, and as Lucy mentioned, it's going to take resources. So the research recommended that two-part pilot that Lucy just described.
Mhm.
So we're starting small. We're building on our existing Stepping Into program, which we participate in annually, which is internships for graduates with disability. And the Career Access program will go a step further. So it will include more tailored support for people with intellectual disability. So that means we're partnering with specialist organisation to provide training and support to the managers and teams who will be hosting the interns. It means making our systems and recruitment processes truly accessible because it's not just about creating that role. Sometimes that's the easy part. It's about making sure we're setting up these incoming interns up for success to be able to shine on and show their true potential.
And what would success look like for you coming out of a project like this?
So it's getting a pilot. So we're already moving into that. So we're full steam ahead. We've officially put those plans into action. We've locked in a paid part-time pilot placement at one of our courts.
Fantastic.
And the role has been carefully crafted to fit the strengths and the support needs of the individual taking part, who's already been identified as well. And now it's all about making that pilot work so that we can hold up an example to other areas of the business and to other agencies. We're hoping to get this placement started within the next month, but there may be delays because we do want to make sure that all those foundational pieces are in place. So if it takes a little bit longer to get right, then that's what we're focusing on rather than a deadline. And my colleague Nina is currently working with the host team and manager, helping them build their disability confidence, setting up onboarding and induction support, and looking into what formal training might be available for this individual that ties in with the New South Wales government capability framework. We want to make sure that once they've passed through the pilot program, that if there are other roles available, whether it's in this same team or somewhere else in the business, they've gone through comparable capability assessment as part of their recruitment so that they don't just then fade off into out of the New South Wales government, but they've got opportunities and options to move forward if that's what they decide is best fit for them. So we're also having a look at what's working and what could use a tweak as we move through the pilot so that we can make this model stronger and hopefully eventually we can roll it out across other courts at DCJ, and then if it works, other business areas as well. So really, it's not just about DCJ. As Lucy mentioned, we are wanting to set an example for other agencies and for other business areas. So we want to make sure that we're sharing what we've learned so that this research and the outcome of this pilot could be shared and possibly applied in their own context. So I guess we're wishful thinkers and we've got a lot of hope. So we imagine the impact of this growing beyond, one department across New South Wales government or across sector. That's sort of the vision that we entered into the research with. So I guess for now it's focusing on getting this pilot right. We have to make it meaningful for the individual and we need to make sure it delivers real outcomes because it's not just, I guess, about this program. We're trying to change the way we think about inclusion.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Maiten. Lovely to hear that ambition there and really exciting to hear that things are already happening. Lucy.
So what Maiten's talked us through there is really demonstrating the positive mindset that the evidence shows is needed. It's a key enabler of making any initiative work. So it's very exciting to hear how that work has progressed.
Well, we're almost at the end of our conversation, which is hard to believe. It's gone very quickly. A question I like to ask all of our guests on the podcast is, if you had an unlimited budget to put to work towards a new piece of research or education in this area, what would you spend it on? And Maiten, I might come to you first, if that's okay.
Wow, that's a tough one. Unlimited budget. That's unlimited initial. Some of it, actually, it's a shrinking budget. We have to be very creative in how we deliver. I think it would be amazing to scale up. So often budgets are limited to very small pilots. What I would love to see if this pilot progresses and if we had unlimited budget was setting up a team whose job it is to go out into all the different parts of the business and help managers to identify those roles of the future. That's where it's going to come down to. It's not looking at old roles and what people used to do. It's looking at where are people's strengths and how do those intersect with these new ways of working with the technology that is inevitably becoming more and more important in the workplace. So how can we marry those two up and creating real support structure around managers and teams so that it's not place and walk away, it's place, monitor, support, and make sure that they succeed long term.
And adapt as the need adapts too, which is sort of what we're talking about with the evolution of work next to, right? So that's an interesting piece for us to think about. What about you, Lucy?
Well, I would broaden out what Maiten's just talked us through and turn that into an action research project where we're sort of learning as we go. And what I'm particularly interested in is often when I've had the opportunity to talk to people about what barriers are to employment for people with disability, these inflexible recruitment processes are something that everyone complains about. You know, it's like they're designed to keep people out rather than bring people in. So I would like to see how people involved in the career access program in terms of line managers and supervisors and workmates, how they become better line managers of more people in their workplace, not as a result of being a good manager for an employee with intellectual disability. So I'd really like to see how people benefit, how processes benefit from more clarity and clearer processes, less complexity, and what benefits that brings to the workplace.
I love that. Excellent ideas that we will undoubtedly in some way have more conversations about trying to pursue. Thank you both so much for your time today. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to throw to either of you, do either of you have anything you'd like to sort of add to the conversation or any sort of last words or thoughts you'd like to summarise with? Question without notice, Lucy.
I just would like to wish Maiten and the team at DCJ all the best with their advocacy and their work, and also congratulate them on taking the initiative to look at what works and build on that. And it was really wonderful to have the opportunity to undertake that work.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. Maiten, any last words from you?
Well, I guess along the same lines, I just want to thank Lucy and her team. They just came into this work with so much enthusiasm and really open to exploring what the environment in DCJ is and making sure that what we came away with was something practical, because I think sometimes the research can get lost in all the best ways that things can be done, but that's not always based on the reality of the context and the environment. Whereas Lucy and the team really made sure to pay attention to the specific barriers for us and what we needed to make this succeed. So without that, we wouldn't be able to be launching a pilot very, very soon.
Oh, wonderful. That's so great to hear. Thank you both so much again for your time today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you both. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, as always, will be wanting to explore this research in more detail after listening to the episode. So we'll put all relevant links that we've discussed today in the show notes. But if people would like to sort of contact you directly for more information, what's the best way for them to get in touch, Maiten?
So I think the inclusion and diversity team is probably a good point of contact. So I'm sure you can share our website or our email for people to get in touch if they want to hear more. But the research is published, so it's out there in the wide world for anyone to take a look at. And if other agencies want to talk more about how the pilot is going, then reach out. We're really keen to share what we've learned so that others can take it on.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Lucy, how can people get in touch with you?
I am on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Maiten and Lucy. That brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you really enjoyed our discussion, and we'll leave all of the links in the show notes to the information we've discussed today. As always, please feel free to contact us if you've got any follow-up questions or feedback on the episode. We always love hearing from you. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you can join us again soon.